Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel, and it's with mixed emotions that we're back with the MGB GT. So I really love this car. It's probably my favourite car out of all the ones I own, just simply because I've had it the longest and I've done a lot to it. But mixed emotions because I've had a bit of a problem with it the last couple of months, and I've not been driving it. So let's get into what's going on. So what's going on then? Well, I think it's actually quite a simple issue that I need to rectify, but I just haven't really had time to fix it. Something to do with a two-wheeled companion that's arrived in the garage, taking up a lot of my spare time as I try to get out on that as much as I can. So what is wrong with this MG is I think the alternator has gone, and the way it manifested itself as an issue was actually back when I went to the photo shoot at Bicester Heritage. So driving along the motorway, everything seemed fine, except I noticed the volt meter that I've got hooked up in the glove box, it's just a USB charging thing with a little voltage display, had started creeping up. So normally it's about 13.5 volts, maybe 14, to show that it's charging the battery, but it actually crept up to more like 15 and 16, which is very unusual. Now I just put it down to the fact it was quite a wet day and a bit of a cold day, and I thought maybe it was just something happening to do with the temperature. But another thing that was happening was that the ignition light was flickering, which I'd never seen before while driving along. So in my naivety, I just carried on because nothing was actually wrong with the car per se. So I drove back from Bicester. Again, the voltage was a little bit high and the ignition light was flickering away a little bit. But it wasn't until I went on a subsequent trip to pick up a sandwich, of all things. A good friend of mine and his girlfriend run a bakery over in or near Crystal Palace Park in Annerley, and they did a great sandwich for me, by the way. It was a limited edition one called the MGB GT. The name of the bakery is Chatsworth Bakehouse, so do check them out because their food is absolutely phenomenal. And on a Saturday there's a queue which actually stretches all the way down the road because they're so popular. But anyway, picking up my sandwich, I actually broke down on the way back, and the reason was because I think the alternator, there's like a regulator on the back of it, and I think that had just completely worn out. So more current was coming out of the alternator than the electrics could handle, and what I found was one of the wires on the back of the alternator had actually burnt out. So it was actually quite lucky it didn't cause a fire or anything. So I managed to kind of roll into a garage. It was actually a Jaguar Land Rover dealership near Coulsdon, and they were very helpful and let me park there while I fixed it. Managed to sort of hook up a bit of a replacement bit of wire just to get me home, but it was very touch and go. And although the car now starts, I need to replace the alternator, and I've got a spare one, so we'll be doing that in this video. But I just wanted to sort of show you what happens when I start the car. So here we go. We'll try and start this thing. Oh. So that seems to be, you know, idling okay, but I can see straight away when I rev it, the ignition light comes on. So as the alternator is spinning faster, that ignition light blinks, and the voltage I can see on my little dongle over here goes up. So I think on a prolonged drive the same thing is going to happen again. So it's definitely something wrong with the alternator. I'll turn this off. So this might all be really obvious stuff to the seasoned classic car or MGB owner, but it took me a while to actually figure out what was wrong with it, simply because looking on the forums, a lot of people have problems with their distributors, they have problems with their points, condensers, that sort of thing. But the alternator isn't something that fails quite as often, I don't think. But there was one post or a couple of posts on one of the MG forums, maybe the MG Experience or something like that, and someone put it quite simply that if your ignition light comes on while you're driving, that is effectively an alternator warning light. So if it comes on, then there's almost certainly something wrong with the alternator, which means you can skip all of the distributor points, cap, condenser, rotor arm type shenanigans and just look straight to that. And that burnt out wire actually, even though it could have potentially caused a fire, meant that I could immediately identify the alternator as being wrong, because it shouldn't burn out a wire in normal use. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to replace the alternator now. It's only a few bolts, and I'll probably replace the fan belt too, just for good measure. Well, hopefully you can see this. This is my engine bay on the left hand side from the front of the car if you're looking at it, so actually the right hand side of the car as you're sat behind the steering wheel. This is the alternator here, and this is what I suspect is broken. And there's actually 3 points of it being attached to the car. So you've got this bolt here which attaches it to the front of sort of the engine casting. There's an adjuster bolt which is kind of further down, which you need to also undo, and there's also this which is supposed to locate in this bracket but isn't in there for some reason, so I don't really know what's happened there. I've certainly not done this, but it seems like it's been loosened and not put back properly, so I wonder if it's where I last took it for any work, whether they've done something there and things have either rattled off, but I don't see how that could have come out of this hole and stayed like that, so I'm a bit perplexed there. But it does mean that we're kind of missing some parts here to get this fixed back onto the engine block. Now, one thing to note about this particular car is that it was originally a positive earth car, so it would have had a dynamo rather than an alternator. So this bracket arrangement, I think, is only for cars that have had that conversion, whereas I think the alternator cars had a better fitting bracket. You didn't have any of this long bolt gubbins going on here, but I'm a bit surprised about this. I might have to order some more parts to have that secured correctly. But yeah, we'll start anyway by taking things apart, and we'll get the new alternator in there. You can actually see the bodge that I made. This is a 2-cable connector, if you can see that, that's attached to here. But it was the only sort of spade style connector big enough in my toolkit that I had with me to connect this back up to the alternator here. So I've ordered some different insulated spade connectors that I can put back on here. They look more like the original equipment, so that'll be going on. Yeah, one alternator. So here are the alternators, old and new, and they look more or less identical. Slight fan design difference on the new one, and also you'll see that I have to carry over the adjuster bracket from the old one. I could have undone that bolt on the alternator instead of the adjustment one, but I found that the other one I could see, whereas the other one I couldn't, although I think it would have been easier to get to that one actually in hindsight, so perhaps I will replace the adjustment bracket before I put the new alternator on. And the other thing about the new one, on some of them, is you'll get a little metal insert on the rear bracket, which for me means I can't put in that bolt. I think the bolt's going to be too thick to put through there, so I'll have to drive that out with something before I fit it. Time to put it back in. So once you've got your alternator more or less back in the same position, with the bolts kind of quite tight but not completely done up, you can adjust the fan belt to the right place. So it needs to have a bit of tension to it. So you get it over the bottom pulley, which is reasonably easy to do, and the fan, which is right here, and then you need to get it over the alternator, which will now swing on the adjuster bracket, because that's not completely done up. Might be a bit stiff like mine. Okay, so that was a little bit of a faff in the end, but the alternator's mounted in place and the fan belt is tightened. Let me just zoom in a little bit. Yeah, so the fan belt was quite tight, tighter than ones I've had before, so it was quite hard to actually get the alternator bolted in place and then put the fan belt on it. So I had to kind of undo some stuff and then let the alternator sort of go in at an angle to get the fan belt on and then tighten everything up. So I've not had to move up the adjuster much, but I guess over time, as the fan belt stretches a little bit, I'll be able to tighten it again later. I don't think it's so tight that the bearings are going to get sort of worn out quicker on the alternator, but you know, I don't really have a choice, so we'll have to go with it. The other thing I've done is I've put a new connector on the end of the alternator wire there. That's the thing that burnt out. I've actually found the burnt out one. Let me just get that. Let's see if I can put it in front of the camera. This is it. Is this going to focus on it? Yeah, so quite a bit of damage there from the extra current going through that. So I'm going to connect up these wires now and then we'll turn it on. The weird bracket thing at the back, I've not put that back in because what I've done, I've ordered a replacement alternator conversion bracket from Moss Europe, and that should come sometime this week. And instead of having a long bolt, it effectively just puts this bit nearer to here. So it's a much more neater solution than was there previously. And yeah, we'll be good to go. Yeah, so like I say, I'm going to put these wires back on and we'll start it up and make sure that that ignition light's gone out. Okay, so let's try this. Lumpy side because it's cold now, but the key thing is that the ignition light isn't flashing anymore. So that's a good result, I think. So it's running and we've not got that ignition light coming on, or the alternator light as I've mentioned, and charging's on 14.5, which is a bit high, but it's not the 16, 17 that I was getting on the motorway, which is the main thing. So wait for that bracket to arrive, fit that, and then we'll take it out for a drive. I couldn't resist taking it out. I'm sure the bracket being missing isn't going to matter. The one from Moss is going to come in the next few days, but the weather turns and I was really keen to drive this car again. It's my birthday on Friday and I really wanted to go out for a drive on my birthday in this car, but the weather looks like it's going to be a bit wet, unfortunately, so I just thought I may as well just go for a drive now. A bit hasty, but I haven't driven it since February. I looked up when I last drove this car, when I got that sandwich, etc., and it was that long ago. So time is really flying at the moment. I've had so much going on at home, with either doing up the house or the garden. We had our 40th party a few weeks ago and a lot of preparation for that, and of course the motorbike, being my new toy, has been taking up all of my spare time getting out and practicing on it. And I was kind of worried that motorcycling was kind of taking over being my kind of hobby in a way, because I really like going on it, although it is early days, I suppose. So getting back in the car really sort of makes me realise how much I do love classic cars, and especially this one. As I said, 40 on Friday, and I actually got this car just before my 30th birthday. So I've had this car over 10 years now, and there's a connection you get from owning a car that long, and I kind of forget sometimes that I really do enjoy driving this car and getting out in it, and the sort of visceral feeling of an old car with a wooden steering wheel, no power steering, no ABS, limited power, but you know, noise and all the rest of it. It's such a great feeling, and quite like, I suppose, motorcycling in a way. It's that sort of very analog feeling you get from being involved in the machinery and how it gets down the road. So what I'm going to do is just do a little bit of a drive, just a 5 or 10 minute lap, because my wife is due home and we're supposed to be eating together and that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's going to be short but sweet, but yeah, worth it, because it's just reinvigorated that passion I've got for classic cars. So I hope you enjoyed this video, a bit of a catch up with the MG, and finally got it fixed, even though it was just a simple thing. Just getting around to replacing the alternator just took way longer than it should have done. But yeah, hopefully more to come on this car and my other cars over the next few weeks. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.